Father Damian Richards, pastor of St. Nicholas of Myra and Hayes and St. Francis of Assisi in Munger. Talking today about St. John Paul II. His feast day is October 22nd. John Paul was Pope from 1978 to 2005. I was in 8th grade when he became Pope, and I had been a pastor, not a priest, but a pastor, for 10 years when he passed away in 2005. And I was able to see John Paul II in person twice. First was in Rome in January of my deacon year. And this is a picture I got to shake hands with him. And this is the picture that I have of me shaking hands with the Pope. And then the second was in World Youth Day in Denver. Now, in 1992, papal audiences were a lot smaller scale than they are today, but it was still very impressive. When the audience was over, John Paul II made his way along the front row of the audience chamber, which is where I got the picture taken. And it was at that papal audience that I truly encountered the global church. Growing up in Kansas, I thought the church in the United States was the church the world over. Intellectually, I knew that other countries had other customs, other worries, and other perspectives, but I still thought the United States was the norm. Compounding my cultural blinders was the fact that I had only secular news for my coverage of church issues. EWTN was still in its infancy back in the 90s. And of course, the default of secular coverage of Catholic issues is criticism. It was in the 1990s, and it still is today. So, criticism of John Paul II, criticism of church teachings, criticisms of the Pope for not changing these outdated doctrines. So I went to that papal audience thinking that the Pope was unpopular and that the world didn't like him, because that's what the secular media told me. Boy, was I in for a surprise. The audience chamber was international, all showing their love for the Pope. People cheered when he came on stage. They were proudly waving their country's flags. And it was then that I realized there was more to the Catholic Church than just my Midwestern American perspective and the secular media's constant critiques. I realized the United States is not the center of the Catholic world, and that the Pope has to offer pastoral care to people from all over the world. And if there was any Pope who was aware of that, it was John Paul II, the most traveled Pope ever, visiting 129 countries. That gives you a unique perspective. So I realized if the Pope says something that doesn't make sense to me, or people in the West critique him for it, the message may not be addressed to me. Perhaps he is encouraging people on the other side of the world. My final story about John Paul II happened at the closing Mass of Denver's World Youth Day. In his homily, John Paul II said, "We are not ashamed to proclaim the gospel." And that phrase got polite applause from the 300,000 people at Cherry Creek Reservoir. But after the creed, before he introduced the intercessions, the Pope paused and he said, "I want to make a correction. In my homily, I said we were not ashamed to proclaim the gospel. I was wrong," he said. "No, Holy Father," people were shouting. No, we're not ashamed. No, you're not wrong." "Yes, I was wrong," said the Pope. And then, with his voice shaking with emotion and power, he said, "We are not ashamed to proclaim the gospel. We are proud to proclaim the gospel." And 300,000 people erupted in cheers. Yes, we are proud to proclaim the gospel. And that phrase, that story itself, explains the appeal of John Paul II and why nearly 2 decades after his death, his legacy still inspires us. And have a blessed day.